Okay, so this is 6.7. It says toggle mixed up or write code practice. We're going to do the write code practice parts. And we're going to read through these questions. And as we read through, we're going to answer them. Okay, and we're going to write code in order to solve each one of these. Okay, so the first one, it says, write a loop that traverses the array from 0 to less than the length of the array. In the loop, double each element in the array and print out each new value on the same line. So if we're going to do that, my first instinct is to create a for loop. Okay. And we'll say we'll use an enhanced for loop. So we'll say for each, I'll call the variable num in array. I'm sorry.
Doubling each value.
Oh, we are doubling each value. I thought I was just printing it out. Oh, we're doubling each value. Thanks for sharing that. We are doubling each value, so we cannot use enhanced for loop. So I'll say I is less than whatever the array length is, and then we will increment by 1 each time. Okay, so we're going to double each time. So I'll go ahead and say the array index of whatever we're at, we are going to multiply it by 2 and then assign it back to whatever that index was, or that whatever element was. So we'll take 1, multiply it by 2, 2 by 2, 3 by 2, 4 by 2, 5 by 2. And then it says it should be printed on the same line. So we won't use print line. We'll just say print. And what is it that we will print? We will print out whatever element we're dealing with in the array plus, and we'll concatenate that and just add a comma and a space. Okay. I think that's what they want. Let me see if I forgot anything. Compiling and running your code. There you go. Okay. So we went ahead, took the array, we doubled each element in it, and we then printed it out. Whatever index we were working with goes inside of there into the array. All right. Next one. It says, write a for loop that fills an array with elements that count up from 0 to 50. Okay, so we have our values here. Or we create our array. There's going to be 11. We're going to count up from 0 to 50. So, I don't know, maybe we'll create a variable called j, and I'll assign it 0. And then I'll write a for loop. And we want to run through. So I'll say, we'll go through every single index. Int I is assigned 0 as long as I is less than array.length. And we'll start each time, we'll increment by 1. So what we want to do is we want to assign whatever array value that we're working with there. The first one is going to be assigned j, because j, we're starting off with 0 there. Okay. And increment by 5 each time. So It says we want to print each element out on a separate line. So I'll say system.out.println will print out, we'll print out whatever element we're dealing with in that moment right there. And then we will increment j by 5, right? So it starts at 0, moves up to 5, then 10, then 15, then 20, and so on. Okay, so it starts at 0, prints 0 out, then it adds 5 to it. Then it goes through the next element in the array, and it assigns whatever value that is, which is 5, and moves on from there. Let's see if I did it right. I'm waiting, compiling, running your code now. And it worked. Okay. And that was the second one. Okay. Moving on to the next one. Okay. It says write an enhanced for loop, enhanced for each loop to traverse the array and print out an element if it's even. Okay. Our enhanced for loop looks something like this, where maybe I'll say int num inside of the array. So it's going to go through every single, it's going to 14, -5, 2, 17, 29. And we want to see if it's even. So I'll say if num, if dividing by 2 and the remainder is 0, I use the modulus there, right? If you divide a number by 2 and the remainder is 0, then it must be even. And if it's even, it's going to print it out. System.out.println, and we'll print out num. Anything else? Let's see if I did that one right. Okay, printed out 14, 2, -8, and 36. Those are all even. It did not include -5, 17, and 29. Okay, moving on to the next one. It says finish the method to return the smallest integer in an array R given as the parameter. Okay, so it has this parameter passed in array, and it wants us to return the smallest. And it goes ahead and starts off and assigns the smallest to whatever the first element is in that array. So we want to loop through and we want to find whatever the smallest one is. So I can use a for each here. And in here, I'll say for int num in array, we'll say if num is smaller than smallest, then we'll say smallest is now whatever that number was. So if you have a number that's already smaller than whatever the smallest number is, then that becomes the smallest. And then after all of that, looks like it already has the return there, return smallest. All right, let's run it and see if I forgot anything. All right, so I was right. So I have my for loop, I have my for each. It goes through for each number inside of the array. Remember, you can name this variable whatever you wanted. You can name it I. I just said num. As long as num is smaller than the smallest, we're assigning the smallest to the num. Or sorry, we're assigning the num to whatever the smallest is already. All right. Moving through for the next one. It says, finish the method to return the average of the elements in an array, given the parameter. The method should return the average. Okay, should return the average of the elements. So first we have to add them all up, right? So I'll say I'll have my for loop. If we're adding up everything that's in there, I can say int num. I'll use a for each. And I'll say for each number that's inside the array, we're going to take this variable sum and we'll add to whatever that num is. Okay. And then what we want to do is, if we're finding the average, we'll go ahead and return whatever the sum was divided by array.length. So if you add them all up and then divide them by however long the array is, that should give you the average. Let's see if I made any mistakes. And it passed. Okay. So looking at this, right, we're finding the average. We're looking at these values that's in the array. I'm looking through every single value in the array. And I'm just adding up all these values into a variable called sum. Then I get here, and I take the sum, divide it by whatever the length is, and that's my answer. Okay. Moving along. God bless you. Next one. It says, finish the method to return the largest integer in an array. Okay. So if I'm finding the largest, I guess first starting off, I'll create a variable called largest. And I'll assign it the very first element in the array. And then we'll have a for loop. And we'll loop through. I'll call this int num. And we'll use the R array. And if we want to find the largest, I'll say if the number that's passed in is greater than whatever the largest is that we're already dealing with, then the largest becomes whatever that number is. And at the very end, let's return the largest. Let's run it. And it passed. Okay. Make sure you first start off by writing, we're assigning whatever the first element in the array is. That's going to start as the largest. So that's our comparison, right? That's where the largest originally is compared to. So yeah. All right, this one, it says, finish the method so that given an array as a parameter, returns the elements right shifted by 1. All right, so we have this result. Okay, so we're going to take like 6, 2, 5, 3, and we're going to take whatever 3 is, or sorry, whatever the last index is, which is 3 in this case, and we'll move it to the very first one in our next. So there's different ways that you could write this. the way that I'm going to do it is I'll start off and say result 0 is going to be assigned whatever, I'll say wherever we're at in the array, whatever the last one is. So I'll say array.length -1. Right, so that way, that automatically, the first thing I'm doing is I'm taking whatever the last one is, since it's like at the very end, I'm going to automatically shift that to be my very first element in there. Okay, then maybe I'll create a variable called j, and I'll assign it to 1, because if I already have my first index in 0, and I'm about to add a for loop looping through that array, maybe I should start that off with a 1 there. I can explain more in a second. So in my for each, I'll say, well, maybe I'll write it as if I'm looking through, so I'm not going through all of them, I'll say int I assign 0, and I'm going to run it as long as I is less than whatever I'll say result.length -1, because we've already taken whatever the last element is in the first array. We've already taken that and moved it to the first. So we're not going to go through the entire. We're only going to go through whatever's leading up to that. So 6, 2, and 5. And then each time I'll increment it by 1. Okay. And then what I'll do is for wherever we're at in the result, I'll say result j is assigned whatever the value is in whatever element in the array we're dealing with. So here, the very first element, I0, right, 6 would get assigned to our index 1. And that's why we originally set j there. Okay, and now from here, I need to increment j by 1. Okay. And then at the very end, that will return the result. So let me see. I may have missed something. Let me go ahead and run it and then fix if I missed anything. Okay, passed. So that makes it easy. I'll explain what I did. So I have this method, right? It's going to ultimately return a list, and it shifts everything in the array to the right. So I want to make sure that I'm shifting 6 to where this is, 2 where this is, and 3 goes to the front. Since 3 going to the front is probably the most difficult concept to grasp there, I went ahead and did that first, where I took whatever the first index is in the result, which is right here, and I took the very last index in the array length -1. The length in here is 4, but if I did 0, 1, 2, 3, I have to subtract 1 from the length. That's where I got -1 from. I then went ahead and created a variable called j and just assigned it 1 because I knew that I'd have to be starting at that first index in my result list. So then I create a loop which looped through 6, 2, and 5 and basically pushed 6, 2, and 5 forward 1, knowing that 3 had already been shifted to the front in this first line right here in line 12. Okay, it loops through. J helps keep it in check to make sure it doesn't go too far. And then we return the result. Okay. So that's what you would do for that one. Okay, this one says finish the method to return a new array of length 2 containing the middle two elements. So it should return 2 and 3. So if I'm looking for the middle index, right? If I'm looking for these two, the index would be 1 and 2. So the way you find the middle of anything is dividing it. So you find the list length divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2, but 0, 1, 2, that's actually the third index. So I'd have to subtract 1 from it. So the middle index would technically be, it would be array dot length divided by 2 minus 1. Okay, I put parentheses around that just so that way that's performed first. It's just a good habit to get in. I'm also going to end in a semicolon. And then here, result 0 would be the array middle index semicolon. And this would be array middle index plus 1 semicolon. Okay, it says no loop necessary. We're just taking the length of our array, dividing it by 2, and subtracting 1 from it to make sure the index is correct. 4 divided by 2 is 2, minus 1 is 1, which allows me to hit 0, 1, which would be 2, and then 3. All right, let's run it. Make sure I did this right. There you go. All right, moving on. It says finish the method that should return the string. How many more of these we got? 2 more. Okay. It says finish the method that should return string array that is in reverse order, so that BAZ should return ZAB. Okay. So we've passed in array, and then result is our new array. So I want to first start off by looking at this. If I have BAZ, I'm going to go to and assign whatever the last index is and work in reverse order. So let's say for I will start off with whatever the result dot length is minus 1. As long as I is, we'll say, greater than or equal to 0. And each time we'll subtract 1 from it. Okay, so we'll start there. Or do I just want to, I think what I'll do is, I think I'll change this up. I might end up changing it up again, but we'll see what I do. I'll just start I is 0, right? As long as I is less than whatever the result dot length is, and we'll add 1 each time. But I'll create a separate variable, and we'll say int j will be whatever the, we'll say, whatever the array dot length is minus 1. Okay, so that will start at the back of it. Since we'll be starting at the very last one. So we're going to assign where we're at. So we'll say result index 0 is going to be assigned whatever the array was index j. But then each time we have to subtract 1 from j. So let me just think of the logic here and make sure I'm doing this right. So j was whatever the array length was minus 1. We've gone through, if I say index result 0 will be assigned whatever array j is. The array length is 3, so that would be index 2. So it should take z and assign that to the first one, and then move on, subtract 1 from it, and so on. Let me run this. Let me see if int I. Look at that. Thanks for reminding me. Int I. Silly mistakes. Those are mistakes I make all the time. Wells is a savior. Look at that. Int I. It happens when you go back and forth between Java and Python all the time.
I feel you.
You feel me? Yeah. All right. Finish the method so that it copies the first half of an array given as an argument to the method into a result array, which is returned. Finish the method so it copies the first half of an array. Okay. So I only want the first half of it. So we'll say, so let's say an array is passed in. I don't know. I'm gonna like make a visual for this, right? So let's say the array passed in is like 9, 5, 7, 10, 4, and 3. Right? We want 9, 5, and 7. So we would have to say, if we're looping through this array, we want to return whatever the length is divided by 2, but then also subtract 1 through it. So I'll say, how about this? I'll create a variable called middle. I'll just say m. And m will be assigned whatever the array length is minus 1. Okay. And then my for loop, I'll say int I is assigned 0. Do we want first half of an array? So I have to first create my target, my result. So I'll say int result. I'm seeing if I'm passing any of that down there. No, it's not. So I'll say result is going to be, we will create, see how we did this last time. I guess we did a string last time, so that we'll just keep it result. I'll copy these lines of code from down up there and move them down here. And it's not a new string, it's new int. And however long the array is, okay, so the first half of the array, it doesn't say that the array is an int. So I'm just going to do integers, and hopefully that works. I guess it could be string. It doesn't specify and say the first half of a string array. I guess up here it does. Okay, so it does say int. All right. So I'm going to make this an int. And then we want to loop through where we're going to stop as long as I is less than or equal to m. And then I guess I really don't really need that line above, but oh well. You don't have to include this line above, and you can just say the array length minus 1. And what are we going to do each time? We're going to take whatever we'll assign result I, and we'll assign it wherever we are in the array. So how many times will we go through? So if I had this as my array, 9, 5, 7, 10, 4, 3, I would take, well, m would be whatever the array length is. So it would be 6 minus 1. I would also then, well, I guess it would be array length, if I'm doing the first half, array length divided by 2 minus 1. Because that would be 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I guess I really wouldn't even have to subtract 1 from it. And it could just be whatever the array length is divided by 2. And then that would give me, in that case, 3. So it would give me 0, 1, and 2. But then I couldn't have this equal sign. Okay, so I literally could write I is less than array length divided by 2, right? That should work as well. But then in the end, it wants me to return whatever the result was. I may have made a silly mistake, but let's go ahead and run it, see what happens. So I returned the result. So let's see what I did wrong. So it looks like the array originally was this, the first half. Aha. So what I did was I made the mistake of saying, all right, our result is not array.length, it's array.length divided by 2, right? Because if there's 6 elements in this array, the result should only be 3, right? It shouldn't be another result of 6. So let's run it and see if there's anything else. Okay. So just correcting what I did here. And you could actually take out, like I said, you could take out this line for m, and you could just say, like I could do this, watch. I could say I is less than array length divided by 2, right? Or I could even say I is less than, as long as I is less than whatever my result dot length is, right? That might be the most efficient way of writing it. Let's rerun it. Right? So that might be the best way to write it. If we're looking to write clean code, I took this line out altogether. You don't need that variable. Just wrote it while I was processing all of this. That's a common thing that I do when I'm first processing something, figuring something out. I might be working through it in my head and realize, oh, there's an easier way of doing this. Okay. So we took the first half. I'll just go ahead and take it out so it's not confusing here. The original mistake I made was when I created this result array, I didn't actually divide it by 2. I had a 6-element array, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So divide it by 2, and then I took my for loop through the first half of the result, or first half of the array that was passed in, ARR, and then we were able to assign that to our result array. All right. 11 out of 11 completed on this page. All right. And that is 6.7. Now, there's a bunch of, there's other practice and stuff you can go through. But technically, and let me just check this to make sure I'm accurate in saying this. I think we are right on track. Let's see what the pacing guide looks like. It says that Unit 7 should be started at the end of January. And today is February 1st. So I guess that's as close to as we can get, right? So I will go back to, where is this at? This is what I'm presenting. I'll go back to this, and we'll skip 6.8. We'll go right to Unit 7. You can go through and practice these if you want, but we're going to go to 7.1. Okay, hopefully we're able to get through this today. This says 7.1, Intro to Array Lists. Array lists are different from arrays. So it says, in the last unit, we learned about using arrays to hold collections of related data. However, arrays are not very flexible. Most notably, the size of the array, when you first create it, that's when you establish the size of it. And you cannot change or append additional elements onto the end of that, right? Which is useful in some ways, but array lists allow you to do a little bit more. It says, what if you don't know how big the collection of data will be, right? On the left right there, it shows a shopping list or a to-do list. What if your shopping list was limited to only 5 items, right? And you couldn't move past the 5th one, but you needed 7. Okay, so they use to-do list, shopping lists as an example. What if you want to both add and remove items from a collection? For example, if you wanted to represent a shopping list, you might add to the list throughout the week and remove things while you're shopping. Same as a to-do list. Once you complete something, be able to check it off. You probably would not know how many items will be on the list at the beginning of the week. For cases like this, Java has a class called Array List, which is a resizable list. It is called Array List because it stores the items that have been added to it in an underlying array. But it also takes care of keeping track of how many items have been added to the array, and it will create a new, bigger array under the covers when needed to hold more items. Okay, So it says you can use array list instead of arrays whenever you don't know the size the array you need, or you know that you'll end up adding or removing items, and you may need to change the size during runtime. An array list is mutable, okay, opposed to immutable. An array list is mutable, meaning it can change during runtime by adding and removing objects to it. So array lists are more flexible than arrays. They sound like, just this initial description here, it might sound like a Python list. Okay, it says an array list is often just called a list on the CSA exam. Prior to 2020, the APCSA curriculum included interfaces, which are somewhat like classes, and the interface list was often used to declare a variable that would refer to array list, but they're no longer on the exam. But if you see a list being used in some old exam preparation, just assume that it's an array list. Okay, which of the following is a reason to use an array list? An array list will always use less memory than an array. An array list can store objects, but array can store primitive types. An array list has faster access to the last element than the array, or an array list resizes itself as necessary items are added, but an array does not. I'm going to say D. That's correct. Okay. The array list class is in the java.util package. Okay, what is a package? We haven't talked about packages yet. A package is a set or library of related classes. The classes we have used until now, such as string and math, are in a special package called java.lang, whose classes are always available in any Java program. Other packages, such as java.util, provide classes that can only be used either by importing them or by referring to them by their full name, which includes a package as a prefix. The full name of ArrayList is java.util.ArrayList. But rather than type that out all the time, we will import it. Think of Python, for those of you guys that took APCSP, of how we were importing things in the beginning, right? If we're importing java.util.ArrayList, we can now use the array list more frequently. Okay. Import statements have to come before the class definition, so make sure you're declaring it at the top. Okay, so to import just one class, we use a single import, just like below here. It says after such an import statement, anywhere array list is used, it will just assume that you're thinking about java.util.ArrayList. Another option is to import all, right? And this is the asterisk, which says the wildcard import. So it just imports everything. You could do that. This import statement will also cause ArrayList to refer java.util.ArrayList, but many other names of classes defined in the java.util package will also be available to you now. We use scanner very briefly, which helps us receive user input. Using wildcard imports can cause conflicts if you import all the classes from two different packages and if they have class names in common, but usually that's not a problem, at least with packages that are part of Java itself. Okay. It says, don't worry about adding import statements during the AP exam. They'll already provide all of that for you. So they're giving you this context and just letting you know, hey, look, this is why we're doing things. You may have been using this before and we didn't tell you why. Here's the why now. But still, even though I gave you the why, it's not super important right now because you're not going to be tested on it immediately. Okay, which of the following is true about import statements? You can have only one? No. You must specify the class to import. Import statements must be used before other code in a Java source file. You must import the java.lang.string to use the short name of string. Okay, we'll say C. Correct. So import statements must be before other code. That's why we put all our imports at the top. Okay, all right, so we learned what they are. How do we use them? So to declare an array list, it says to use array list. To declare an array list, use array list type, and then whatever the name of that is. And it says type, called a type parameter, is the type of the object you want to store in the array list. So it gives an example here, right? Array list, and then inside a less than and greater than symbol, we put what type. In arrays, we use ints, we use strings, right? Then we name it. It says shopping list is a new array list. All right, so a lot of different symbols going on, right? We're going to go through this many times so that way this becomes common, but just a first glance at this. It says you can declare a variable to just be of type array list with no parameter, and it'll be approximately the same as if you had declared the array list object. But it's good practice to specify the type of objects you intend to store in the array list, and it allows the compiler to find errors that maybe otherwise would be missed until runtime. All right. Note that array list can hold only reference types like string. Okay, so important, check this out. Array list can only hold reference types like string. Since they can't hold primitive types, int and double. Okay, if we want a collection of numbers, we need to use wrapper classes. We talked about this before. Not with array lists. I forget when we use them. If it was unit 2 or unit 3 maybe. But we use these wrapper classes, integer and double. So if you want to create an array list of integers, it can't be array list and then int, lowercase, has to be capitalized. These are called wrapper classes. It says you can mostly treat the elements of the array list as if they were, so you can still treat them like ints and doubles. Okay. In the code below, we're declaring a variable called nameList that can refer to an array list of strings, but currently doesn't refer to any array list yet as it's set to null. So I'll run it. Okay, so this is just saying, hey, I'm creating this array list, and we're not actually assigning any values to it yet. We're just saying, hey, look, I'm creating this array list, letting you know it's there. It's called name list. We haven't added any names to it yet, and it returns null. It says, as with other reference types, declaring a array list variable doesn't actually create an array list object. It only creates a variable that can refer to array list or null. To actually create an array list, we must invoke a constructor such as new array list, right? We've done this before. So you can get the number of items in an array list by using the size method. Okay. Notice that a newly constructed array list is empty and thus has a size of 0. Also remember, you can't call methods on null. So trying to call size on the value of list 2 at line 10 below causes a null pointer exception. So we'll run it and we'll see what it means. We'll see what we get. It says, look, In line 10, we get a null pointer exception. So it says change list to declaration, so that creates a new array list. Okay. And we can do that by, if we're creating the new array list, we can say new array list, less than string. And if we run it, that then allows me to use that there. Okay. So making sure that when we create these lists, if we're using the size method, notice we wrote namelist.size, list2.size. They're right there. So as I mentioned, in order to create array lists of integer and double values, we have to use the wrapper classes. All primitive types must be wrapped in objects before they are added to an array list. For example, int values can be wrapped in integer objects and double objects. However, this normally happens automatically thanks to autoboxing. You can actually put in any kind of objects in an array list, including instances of classes. Okay, so let's run this. And if we're just moving through this, we've imported java.util.all. And then we have array list create int. We have our main method. And look, we created this list called num list. We said that we were using integers. And it's a new array list, right? We don't have to declare the size or how many we're adding in there. And how many do we actually have in here right now? None. Okay. Which of the following is the correct way to create an array list of integers? Okay. Well, notice we're using not square brackets, so it can't be A. We want to sort integers, not strings. We can't use the lowercase int. We have to use the uppercase, so it's D. Okay. It says, although it is not on the AP exam, you can convert an array to a list using the static method as list from the arrays helper class. And it would be arrays.asList. Note that array list has a toString method that is automatically called to print the list in a nice format. Okay, if I run this, we'll walk through it afterwards. So here's what it does. So I have my main method. I have my list, or sorry, I have my array, right, of names, Dakota, Madison, Brooklyn. Okay. And with that, it says right below it, I have an array list of type string. We're going to call this names list. And it's a new array list string. And what I'm putting inside of those parentheses is arrays as list names. So I had this list of names that was imported in, right? And from that, I was then able to take those names and put them into a list. So maybe we can add to them. So maybe you're importing something, maybe you're importing an array and you want to take those values and store them in a list that you can then add to. You can simply do that by passing that in, but make sure to use arrays.asList. So that asList method. Okay. It says you can add values to an array list using its add method, described in detail in the next lesson. So we'll talk more about adding things in the next lesson. It says try the code below. Note that the type of the array list, string or integer, also determines the type of parameters and return types for all of its methods. So add and print work for any type of array list. And when array list is a list of integers, autoboxing takes care of wrapping the int arguments like 2 and 4 into instances for integers for us. So I'm running this and we'll take a look. Okay, we have starting off here, we'll look through it. We have our main method. We have an array list and we're creating a list of strings and we're calling the shopping list. And then we're just saying, hey, look, we're going to put some strings in here. The size of it, when we first print it out, it's going to be 0. Then we're going to add carrots, shopping list.add. Seems pretty easy, right? Kind of like how in Python we had .append to a list and we added something in the append method. Okay, add. And then we added bread. And then we added chocolate. So we have carrots, bread, chocolate. Then we printed out the size using the size method. Okay. And then what we did was we created an array list of integers. And we said quantities was what we named this. And we added 2 and we added 4 to it. And we printed it out. Now notice when we print this array list out, it has square brackets around it, similar to what we did when we dealt with arrays, right? So there's something to think about when you're going through this is that we're always adding on to the end of the list. So carrots on the end of the list, bread on the end of the list, chocolate. So it asks us, can you add another item to the shopping list? Sure, no problem. So I'll go to the end of my code and I'll say shopping list dot add. What should we get from the store? What's something good we should get from the store?
Milk.
Milk? Let's add milk to our list. And I'll run it. Yeah, I guess it wants to print it out too, right? So we'll add 1 and then we'll print out the new shopping list. So I'll say system.out.println and I'm going to print out the new, not shoe, new shopping list. Let's see where we're at here now. There you go. See, I take things very literal. Can you add another item to the list? I added an item to the list. It didn't say, can you add another item to the list and then print it out, right? I added the item to the list and then also, you're correct. It wants me to print it out too. Okay. Array lists. Questions on array lists? Let's look at this. It says programming challenge FRQ digits. This programming challenge is based on the 2017 free response question. In this question, you're asked to write a constructor for a class called digits. This constructor takes an integer number as its argument and divides it up into its digits and puts the digits into an array list. For example, new digits 154 creates an array list with digits 1, 5, 4. First, let's discuss how to break up a number into its digits. Try the code below. What happens if you divide an integer by 10? Remember that in integer division, the result truncates, cuts off everything to the right of the decimal point. All right, let's just run this and let's see what happens, and then we'll go through our code. Okay. It says set number to a different number and guess what number divided by and percent or in the modulus will return. So if we're guessing, so 154 divided by 10, okay, instead of it giving me 15.4, it gave me 15, right? And when I divided by 10, the modulus right here is, the remainder is 4. So what operator gives you a digit in number? Set number to a different number. So I don't know, we'll say 160. Okay, that way we're able to get a nice even number. But the main thing that they're talking about here is, you know, if I say, I forget what that was before, but I don't know, say 169. Notice how it truncates and takes off whatever is left over since we're dealing with integers and not doubles or floats. Okay. It says, remember that in integer division, the result truncates and cuts everything off. Which digit can you get by using mod 10, which returns the remainder after dividing by 10? Which digit can you get? Try a different number and guess who will print out the check. Okay. It says we can use a while loop to print out each digit in reverse order, starting from the right, 4, 5, 1, to the number 154 while dividing it by 10. You can try it in the active code above. Here's the pseudocode. While number is greater than 0, print out the last digit using the mod. And then change the number to cut off the last digit using division. Okay, it says now let's write a constructor. So here's where we actually do it. And how much time we have left in class? 20 minutes. We still got some time. Yeah, we still got time. We can do this. Just making sure I wasn't starting something and then the bell rang. Okay, so it says, I'm just going back to here because I was trying to see if I could actually get through this, but I can. We can use a while loop to print out each digit in reverse order, starting from the right, 4, 5, 1. You can try it in the active code above. So it wants me to try up there. So if we reset this number to 154, it says while number is greater than 0, print out the last digit using the modulus. Change the number to cut off the last digit using division. Maybe I just haven't wrapped my head around what we're actually doing here. So, okay, so we're passing in 154. For example, creating an array list 154. So we want to divide by, okay, so we want to divide by whatever the number of digits are and then cut it off using the mod. So I could say, here's a pseudocode, print out the last digit using that. So let me look at what it wants down there too. Array list. Let me see how this is relevant in the next one too. start talking about methods there. Let me start looping through them. Some arrayless algorithms. Oh, cool. So there's only 4 lessons in the next chapter too. Chapter 7 is another shorter chapter. Okay. Here's what I'll do. I'll go ahead and pass this on to you guys to complete this last one here. And when we start class next week, we will introduce it. I guess go back through it because my brain's kind of fried right now and I don't want to have to think very hard. So we'll stop there. 7-1, and we'll come back. If you want to start playing through it, that's fine, but I really don't feel like going through this right now. We'll finish 7-1 next class. Yep, you may.